come to pass that everyone that is left of the nations which come up against Jerusalem shall even go from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles, the first day and the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles was Babylon.
Correct.
So he's saying here that the nations are going to come up and keep the Feast of Tabernacles, right?
Keep your hand on the plow. Hold on, hold on, hold on, keep your hand on the plow.
Hold
on.
Yeshua said, no man can put his hand to the plow, looking back before the kingdom of Yah. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on.
Don't you wonder what you gon' wear or eat? Yah's our provider, why can't you see? Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on. Hold on. Keep your hand on the plow.
Hold on. People gonna talk about you much as they please. The more they talk, stay up on your knees. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on.
When my way gets as dark as night, I know Yahshua will be my light. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Hold on. Keep your hand on the plow.
Hold on. When I get to Zion, gonna sing it loud. Nobody there to put me out. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on.
No, my robe is gonna fit me well. Earned it fighting at the gates of hell. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on. Hold on. Keep your hand on the plow.
Hold on. Yeshua said no man can put his hand to the plow, looking back before the kingdom of Yah. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on.
Don't you wonder what you gon' wear or eat? Yah is our provider, why can't you see? Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on.
Hold on.
sacrificial lamb. O Elohim, who hath believed our report, the nation of your chosen people hath fallen and come short. But unto us a child is born, to bring deliverance to the captives, to preach the gospel unto the poor. A man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. With his stripes are we healed, the chastisement of our peace was upon him. Lamb to the slaughter for Israel's sins, a horn of salvation from the loins of King David. As was spoken by the prophets since the foundation, a lamb unblemished, unleavened. The first fruits of many brethren who rested on the Sabbath, as his father did. Has God cast away his people? Elohim forbid. Behold, the man, whose name is the branch, the root out of dry ground, who grew as tender plant. Born of a virgin, born and died king of the Yehudim, head of the corner, the stone, that the builders refused. For he came to set at liberty they that are bruised, to heal the brokenhearted, calling all of his faithful martyrs, all hail Emmanuel. For the government shall rest on his shoulders, his mighty Elohim, wonderful, counselor, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. There shall never be an end to his kingdom's increase, to order and establish with judgment and justice. From henceforth the zeal of Yahweh performs this, to bring forth a rod out of Yesi, on whom Yohanan saw the Spirit, like a dove descend and rest, establishing a new covenant with those under the old, over 1 billion copies sold, but the stories never told or read. Man's sins can't be covered by animal bloodshed. So to whom pertaineth the adoption, the glory, and the covenants, the giving of the law, the service of Elohim and his promises? That's to whom this brother was sent. An ensign calling his people, form countries and isles, gathering all nations to the truth, a light unto the Gentiles. A light that shined in a darkness that didn't comprehend, that he was the final sacrifice for sins. That was past, and in him fountains of living water, bread of life even. But as many as believed and received, he gave power to become the sons of Elohim from Yehuda's land, city of Bethlehem, dwelt in Nazareth, crucified, prophesied to resurrect, dwell in heaven, then return unto the Mount of Olivet. Ariel ben Israel.
All right, Shabbat Shalom, which is peace on Yahweh's holy Sabbath day. Praise Yahweh that we have made it to another one of Yahweh's feast days, and this is the last day of Tabernacles. All of these days are based around the planting and the reaping and sowing of the agricultural season, but just understanding the song of keeping your hand on the plow. There's so much talk about first the name of Yahweh. When we began this in the beginning, there was a whole lot of talk about whether, this was the right name or then this, if you don't use the name that everybody else was using, then, you guys must be in some kind of cult. That is part of keeping your hand on the plow, because after decades of doing this, now those very same organizations that were making accusations are now using those same names. They are now using Yahweh and Yahshua. And then even in the intro, as my late elder read off in Zechariah, that the nations are going to be forced to come up and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This is another part of keeping your hand on the plow. Do we have to wait for public acceptance of our culture, of our life, of our way? Do we have to wait for that? Are we going to be held hostage by the limitations of man's mind or the limitation of man's money, because man will accept certain things as long as it allows them to get paid. And Yahshua wasn't breaking the bank, but another popular name was. So if we decide that we're going to, you know what, to get more people, to get more funds, to build a better organization, then we are just going to use this name or this incorrect name for a while, then that would be equivalent to us taking our hand off the plow and saying, you know, it'll just be better for us financially. And that is a problem, because there's a point where we have to make sacrifices, and those sacrifices are not in a natural fashion as far as the blood of animals. Choosing to use the correct name and allowing yourself to be called all of these names for decades, that is a sacrifice that no one can put a price on. Only Yahweh and Yahshua can decide exactly how much that sacrifice is worth. So there are some sacrifices that we have made that you don't even know that they're going to be accounted as such. As it is written, Abraham believed Elohim, and it was accounted unto him for righteousness. You know, you have to believe to walk in a culture, to walk praise, honor, and prayer offered up in a name that everybody condemns for decades, and then all of a sudden all of those people start coming around. You have already made sacrifices in doing so. So we must, though, keep our hand on the plow so that we don't allow the adversary, the devil. See, once those things are done, he will, back off on those, but he would just take that energy and put it on other parts of the culture. And the question is, will we then allow the attack of the rest of the culture just to be, comfortable for that period of time? We're going to begin today's sermon in Leviticus chapter 23, and we're going to read verses 39 through 44. Now, one of those parts of our culture, you'll hear me and Priest Kish talk about it all the time, that when we were young, we it was normal to see fruit trees everywhere. And then all of a sudden, we've gotten to a point where you don't see any fruit trees. You used to be able to just walk home from school and pick 4 different kinds of fruit on your way home, not going out of your way from school, just walking home from school. These various trees were all throughout the neighborhood. And now we have a generation that have not seen fruit trees ever in their entire life. They've never walked up on one. They've only seen one on television or something of that nature. They've never physically seen a fruit tree. There is something seriously wrong with that. Leviticus chapter 23, and let's start at verse 39.
Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto Yahweh 7 days. On the first day shall be a Shabbat, and on the 8th day shall be a Shabbat. And you shall take you on the first day boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim 7 days. And you shall keep it a feast unto Yahweh 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelite born shall dwell in booths.
Now, one of the items that I often go to within the law, when it starts dealing with the blessing and the curses, I don't think a lot of times people catch this part. It says all that are Israelites born. Okay, so when you start talking about the law and what was commanded of us, that was commanded of the people to whom the covenant was given. So when proselytes come on unto that, keep bits and pieces of the culture, they don't have those curses because it was not originally given unto them. So something just as small as that one term starts to help you understand a lot of other portions that are written in the scriptures. Go ahead.
That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths. When I brought them out of the land of Egypt, I am Yahweh, your Elohim. And Moshe declared unto the children of Israel the feasts of Yahweh.
Now, when we look at branches of palms, boughs of trees, of thick trees, so we are then supposed to take these branches, if you will, and then build us a covering from those branches. All right, let's go to Genesis chapter 2. Because there are times that Yahweh will give us something without completely going into the magnitude of what it is we're doing. Genesis chapter 2, and I want to start going verses 1 through 9.
Thus the heavens and earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day Elohim ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim created and made. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for Yahweh Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. And Yahweh Elohim formed the man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul.
All right, so man was formed out of this ground. Go ahead.
And Yahweh Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made Yahweh Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
So automatically he is putting some emphasis on these trees. There is some significance with Yahweh when it comes down to these trees. Jump to verse 15.
And Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And Yahweh Elohim commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may eat freely, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat thereof you shall surely die.
So our first commandment is connected to this tree, and then look at the power that Yahweh has put in this tree. You have this tree of life that allows a man to live forever, and then you have the knowledge of good and evil also placed in this tree. So we are getting an enormous amount of power coming through the tree itself. Now, understand, a lot of times we will look at a tree as just some inanimate object. But there are these parts of the tree. The part of the tree that you see is above ground, but there's a whole lot more that's going on with the actual nourishment of that tree. You can't see. That part is underground. So there are two parts of this tree, the known portion and then the inner portion that you can't see. So when you deal with us as individuals, of course, you see the outward part of us. But then there is the spirit that drives us, the thought process that directs us into what we are going to be, what we're going to do. And that part of man you cannot see. Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 10. Nehemiah chapter 10, and I want to start that at verse 28.
And the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the porters, the singers, the Nethinims, and all they that had separated themselves from the people of the lands unto the law of Elohim, their wives, their sons, and their daughters, everyone having knowledge and having understanding, they clave to their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and into an oath to walk in Elohim's law.
So they're realizing, especially after coming out of any type of punishment, they realize, okay, this is why this is happening unto us. We have not dealt with Yahweh's law. So at this point, they are binding their souls, their spirits, saying, look, we are going to abide by this. Every time we get off of this, then something horrible happens to our nation. This is why you have different levels of how people deal with the word of Yahweh. Because there are some that see, no. It went well with our forefathers when they abode in the culture that was given unto us. It went horrible with us when we start walking away from it. Go ahead.
Which was given by Moshe, the servant of Elohim, and to observe and to do all the commandments of Yahweh our Adonai, and his judgments and his statutes, and that we would not give our daughters unto the people of the land, nor take their daughters for our sons. And if the people of the land bring ware or any victuals on the Shabbat day to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Shabbat or on the holy day, and that we would leave the 7th year and the exaction of every debt.
All of these items that were already written in the law, they are now reconfirming to do the very things that our forefathers already agreed that they would do. Go ahead.
Also we made ordinances for us, to charge ourselves yearly with the 3rd part of a shekel for the service of the house of our Elohim, for the showbread, and for the continual meat offering, and for the continual burnt offering of the Shabbats, of the new moons, for the set feast, and for the holy things, and for the sin offerings, to make an atonement for Israel, and for all the work of the house of our Elohim. And we cast the lots among the priests, the Levites, and the people for the wood offering, to bring it into the house of our Elohim, after the houses of our fathers, at times appointed year by year, to burn upon the altar of Yahweh our Elohim, as it is written in the law, and to bring the first fruits of our ground, and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees, year by year, onto the house of Yahweh.
Now it says, and to bring the first fruits of our ground, and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees. So it is so interesting now that I'm sure there's some kids that don't even understand that their fruit that they eating come from a tree, because they ain't never seen one on it. All the fruit they ever seen was in a tub at Walmart. They have never seen fruit on a tree. So the tree is required. The first fruit of those trees are required of Yahweh. And we reside in a land of fruitless trees. That is a strange, utterly strange situation. But understanding how much importance Yahweh has put on the trees, it would then get interesting as we go on to see that he has put a negative connotation on it as well. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 16. Deuteronomy 16, and read verses 21 and 22.
You shall not plant you a grove of any trees near unto the altar of Yahweh Elohim, which you shall make you.
Now, not just a grove when it gets down to, because we know that there were certain trees, especially their evergreen tree, their groves, in that way that they were worshipped. But it's interesting that because of what man has began to do with the trees as far as worship, Yahweh does not want them near his altar. Now, we will read where it says, Yahweh is a jealous Elohim. So at what point does the trees being near his altar get to the point where, wait a minute, are y'all worshiping that? You know what? Don't put those trees near my altar. But then we see the importance that he placed on the trees. He put power in the tree. He made a tree to where the power to live forever was put in this tree. The knowledge of good and evil was put in this tree. Yet when he ordained for his altar to be set up, don't put any of those trees near my altar. Now that's quite interesting. Go ahead.
As you mentioned that, you can just imagine, like you say, they just started taking Christmas trees out the church.
Uh-huh.
So you imagine the Christmas trees up on the stage. When it's all lit up, you ain't really paying no attention to him. You paying attention to the lights.
Nope. Every time it blink, you looking at it again. You turn your head and the lights blink and you look right back at it again. Go ahead.
Neither shall you set you up any image which Yahweh your Elohim hates.
Neither shall you set up any image which Yahweh your Elohim hates. So the tree near his altar brings forth some issues, some very strong issues. Let's go to 2 Chronicles chapter 33. Second Chronicles 33, and we're going to read verses 1 through 20.
Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, but did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, like unto the abominations of the heathen, whom Yahweh had cast out before the children of Israel. For he built again the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down, and he reared up altars for Baalim, and made groves, and worshipped all the hosts of heaven and served them.
Right. So these worship practices were already in the land when Israel got there. And these are the very things that Yahweh warned us about. Don't do any of these abominations, because the people who were there already did this, and I'm dealing with them. Go ahead.
Also he built altars in the house of Yahweh, whereof Yahweh had said, in Jerusalem shall my name be forever. And he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of Yahweh.
Wait a minute. He built altars for Yahweh, and he built altars for all the hosts of heaven. Sometimes we'll look at something and we'll say, man, this person was probably just really, really evil to do that. A lot of times the things that we don't see is sometimes people are trying to appease everybody. So if they're going to appease everybody, then they're going to make something for this God, make one for this God, and make one for this God. That way, all of the people are now happy. And just the drive to attempt to make everybody happy, you're going to end up committing evil. Go ahead.
And he caused his children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. Also he observed times, and used enchantments, and used witchcraft, and dealt with a familiar spirit, and with wizards. he wrought much evil in the sight of Yahweh to provoke him to anger. And he set a carved image, the idol which he had made in the house of Elohim, of which Elohim had said to David and to Shlomo his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen before all the tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever. Neither will I any more remove the foot of Israel from out of the land which I have appointed for your fathers, so that they will take heed to do all that I have commanded them, according to the whole law and the statutes and the ordinances by the hand of Moshe.
Now it says, according to the whole law and the statutes and the ordinances. There are certain parts where, when you're talking to people, especially if those people start their study of the Bible starts in the New Testament. So this statement makes no sense. Whole law and the statutes and the ordinances. Wait a minute. First of all, why did he even say whole law? Then you have statutes and ordinances. So now when people get to the part and it says, or they start dealing with, hey, the law is nailed to the cross. Which law? And how does that affect the statutes and ordinances? Go ahead.
So Manasseh made Yehudah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to err, and to do worse than the heathen, whom Yahweh had destroyed before the children of Israel.
Now, so Manasseh made Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to err worse than the heathen. That's pretty strong. Go ahead.
And Yahweh spake to Manasseh and to his people, but they would not hearken. Wherefore Yahweh brought upon them the captains of the host of the king of Assyria.
Now, Yahweh will bring someone to us to attempt to persuade us off of a point. Then when we won't hear that, now he has to bring something upon us. And most of the time to us, this is like our first time hearing. This is our first time realizing that he's upset when the army shows up. Because we didn't really take, that man any, we didn't pay that any mind, because it's not Elohim himself coming. No, he's sending someone. In most cases, they're not hearing directly from Yahweh. Very few people are getting, visited by an angel that they can tell that it's an angel. So a lot of times we are requiring the utmost of rareness to happen to us to prove that something is of Yahweh. Go ahead.
Which took Manasseh among the thorns and bound him with fetters and carried him to Babylon. And when he was in affliction, he besought Yahweh his Elohim.
You see what we do? Let us be in torment. Now we can seek Yahweh. But why does it have to be that way? Go ahead.
And when he was in affliction, he besought Yahweh his Elohim, and humbled himself greatly before the El of his fathers, and prayed unto him, and he was entreated of him.
Now look at the grace and mercy of Yahweh. He already know you ain't call them until they put you in them cuffs. But pretty much everybody call on their creator when they put the handcuffs on you. When they put you in them fetters, when they say you had a right to remain silent, some people start praying right at that moment. But look at his grace and mercy. He still heard. Go ahead.
And heard his supplication, and brought him again to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that Yahweh, he was Elohim. Now after this, he built a wall without the city of David.
Now, the defining part of someone's life and their walk with Yahweh, after you have been visited, the word says, keep your conversation honest among the Gentiles, that upon the day of visitation, they will glorify your Father who art in heaven. Okay, Manasseh just got visited. Now, what do you do after that is going to be the defining part of your life. Go ahead.
Now after this he built a wall without the city of Dawid, on the west side of Gihon, in the valley, even to the entering in at the fish gate, and compassed about Ophel, and raised it up a very great height, and put captains of war in all the fenced cities of Yehudah. And he took away the strange gods and the idol out of the house of Yahweh, and all the altars that he had built in the mount of the house of Yahweh, and in Jerusalem, and cast them out of the city.
Right, the stuff he built. He said, wait, no, I've done this in error. Let me correct myself. I have been humbled. I realize that Yahweh, he is Elohim. These other things ain't real. Go ahead.
And he repaired the altar of Yahweh, and sacrificed thereon peace offerings and thank offerings, and commanded Yehudah to serve Yahweh Elohim of Israel. Nevertheless, the people did sacrifice still in the high places, yet unto Yahweh their Elohim only. Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh, and his prayer unto his Elohim, and the words of the seers that spake to him in the name of Yahweh Elohim of Israel, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel. His prayer also, and how Elohim was entreated of him, and all his sin, and his trespass, and the places wherein he built high places, and set up groves and graven images, before he was humbled, behold, they are written among the sayings of the seers. So Manasseh slept with his fathers, and they buried him in his own house, and Amon his son reigned in his stead.
All right, let's go to Exodus chapter 34. So allowing these groves to be set up can cause our entire nation problems. Exodus 34, and we're going to read verses 1 through 13.
And Yahweh said unto Moshe, Hew you 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and I'll write upon these tables the words that were in the first tables, which you breaketh. And be ready in the morning, and come up in the morning unto the Mount Sinai, and present yourself there to me in the top of the mount. And no man shall come up with you, neither let any man be seen throughout all the mount, neither let the flocks nor herds feed before that mount. And he hewed 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and Moshe rose up early in the morning, and went up unto Mount Sinai, as Yahweh had commanded him, and took in his hand the 2 tables of stone. And Yahweh descended in the cloud, and stood with him there, and proclaimed the name of Yahweh. And Yahweh passed by before him, and proclaimed, Yahweh, Yahweh, Elohim, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving lawlessness and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the lawlessness of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children, unto the 3rd and to the 4th generation. And Moshe made haste, and bowed his head toward the earth, and worshipped. And he said, If now I have found grace in your sight, O Adonai, let my Adonai, I pray you, go amongst us, for it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our lawlessness and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. And he said, Behold, I make a covenant before all your people. I will do marvels, such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among which you art shall see the work of Yahweh, for it is a terrible thing that I will do with you. Observe you that which I command you this day. Behold, I drive out before you the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither you goeth, lest it be for a snare in the midst of you. But you shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves.
But you shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. So all of the items connected to provoking Yahweh unto jealousy, you better go in there and destroy all of that stuff. That cannot be left standing. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 20. Deuteronomy chapter 20, and I want you to read verses 15 through 20.
Thus shall you do unto all the cities which are very far off from you, which are not of the cities of these nations, but of the cities of these people, which Yahweh your Elohim does give you for an inheritance, you shall save alive nothing that breathes.
Right. So in these nations, now there's others that you can deal with differently, but these ones here leave nothing breathing. Go ahead.
But you shall utterly destroy them, namely, the Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, that they teach you not to do after all their abominations, which they have done unto their gods. So should you sin against Yahweh your Elohim. When you shall besiege a city a long time, in making war against it to take it, you shall not destroy the trees thereof by forcing an axe against them.
Okay, wait a minute. So even in all of the utter destruction of getting rid of the people in that land, he has protection for the trees even within this process. Go ahead.
For you may eat of them, and you shall not cut them down, for the tree of the field is man's life.
Wait a minute. For the tree of the field is man's life. Now that's an interesting connection here, because what got man into trouble is dealing with the tree in the garden. And if he ate from the tree of life, then man would never die. So you have some connection here. You cannot destroy these trees because they have a connection to your life. Go ahead.
To employ them in the siege. Only the trees which you know that they be not trees for meat.
Only the trees which you know that they are not used for food. Go ahead.
You shall destroy and cut them down, and you shall build bulwarks against the city that makes war with you until it be subdued.
Right. And we know that it's very interesting when we see the bulldozers in Gaza that they stop and go around in the trees. No. They went in and bulldozed everything that they saw. Yahweh said that is completely illegal according to what's written in the Torah. But then that's going to starve those people out. See, we have rules of engagement. We have rules of engagement according to Yahweh our Elohim. And what's interesting is the people who are in Israel do not follow the rules of engagement of Yahweh, and then they don't even follow the rules of engagement by the United Nations, by an organization that they on their own accord joined. Imagine that. So that's quite interesting. Go ahead, priest.
You know, we read earlier about the types of trees that he said we can cut down. You realize none of those are fruit trees.
Right. He said, you know, that there's a purpose in the way that Yahweh does things. Let's go to Exodus chapter 15. He said, for they are for man's life. Exodus 15, and let's read verses 22 through 27.
So Moshe brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it is called Marah. And the people murmured against Moshe, saying, what shall we drink? And he cried unto Yahweh, and Yahweh showed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them. And said, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I'll put none of these diseases upon you, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am Yahweh that heals you. And they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water, and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters.
So he says, the people cried, verse 25, and he cried unto Yahweh, and Yahweh showed him a tree, which when he had cast it into the waters were made sweet. So they had bitter water, and the people complained. The healing for the water was the tree that had come out of the earth. It was already there. He didn't make a tree. He didn't make anything to give them. The answer was already in the earth itself. So we once again are seeing some power there in things that we often just ignore. But there is some serious power in that. I want you to read that note connected under that for me, because what happens in verse 27, it says, so after he comes to this, he says to them in 26, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim and do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon you. And then he goes and says, and they came to Elim. So after that, they come to Elim, where there are 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees. Now read that note in Genesis for me.
Genesis chapter 46 and verse 27. And the sons of Joseph, which were born him in Egypt, were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob, which came into Egypt, were 70.
So then these trees then represent when we talk 70, we are then dealing with 70. So we are now talking about the nation of Israel, the very foundation. We're talking about the family that was turned into a nation. So automatically these trees are a representation of the nation of Israel. So once again, we are getting to a little bit more clarity. And when we understand that there is a connection, then maybe we'll start treating something a little bit better than how we may treat it when we understand that Yahweh sees these items differently. And if we're going to walk in his culture, we have to learn how to see things how he sees it. Let's go to Mark chapter 8. So he has made a connection with these 70 trees, and we are now looking at the connection with the nation of Israel and its beginnings. Mark chapter 8, and let's read verses 22 through 25.
And he comes to Bethsaida, and they bring a blind man unto him, and besought him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, and put his hands upon him, he asked him if he saw aught. And he looked up, and said, I see men as trees walking. After that, he put his hands again upon his eyes, and made him look up. And he was restored, and saw every man clearly.
Now, why upon the first part, he saw men as trees? What does that mean? What is the connection? So, did he have too much of the blessing? Did he not have enough of it? Why did he see men as trees? Yeshua goes back in again, and now he sees men clearly. In any other miracles or any work done, do we remember Yeshua having to go back and do anything again? Do you remember of anything where he had to go back because he didn't do it right the first time? So the question was, did he give the man too much on the first go? And some of that he had to take back. So go back. So Mark 8, it says, read what he did to him. Verse 23. He says, and he took the blind man by the hand, led him out of town, and when he had spit on his eyes. Now, some of us like, wait a minute now, wait a minute. I mean, you ain't got no cleaner way to heal me. He spit on his eyes and put his hands upon him. He asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men as trees. After that, he put his hands again upon his eyes. Wait a minute. He ain't spit on him again. So if he didn't do it right, then the first part would have been done over. He didn't do that part over. He didn't do that part over. No. He put his hands on him again to fine-tune his healing. All right, now let's go to Romans chapter 11. So when he says unto us, you're going to tabernacle, and I want you to go to get these boughs. I want you to go get branches from all of these trees, and I want you to tabernacle to gather under these trees. What connection is he making? I mean, he calls Yeshua his servant, the branch. So he has us doing or performing some steps that we really don't understand the full connection, because he's making a connection that he's not just putting right out there. Go ahead.
Yeah, Elder, just to touch on what you're talking about here with that whole, he spat on him. When we take these little tests, they don't tell you, they don't catch your DNA sample from your fingerprint.
Nope.
They do it from your spit, and from that spit they can tell you if you're sick, if you got this, and all other kinds of stuff.
You got it. So Yeshua saying, if you're gonna get the healing, then my DNA is the healing. I just looked at something and it says, they got us sucked into doing all of those DNA tests, right? And how people just going in, I'm gonna do my DNA test. Now, who would, want to do all those DNA tests? People who have been robbed of their identity. So then we go in and get these people all our DNA. They were holding all that information and using it to link up all sorts of things. But they didn't tell all of those people that that's what they were doing when that was happening. Then you look at a report from the DNA people that all of the board of directors, all of them resigned. Now, wait a minute. Why would all these people up and resign from a company? Something about to happen, or something done already happened. But then you have, on the flip side, some people who say that they are the blood descendants of the people written in this book. But you're not able, they won't allow any testing of their DNA. Now that's and it was always not allowed in the so-called Holy Land. Now, what did they already know was going to happen with their DNA, and why were they so afraid to make sure that theirs were not known? Let's go to Romans chapter 11 and start at verse 12.
Now, if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead?
Wait a minute. The casting away of them, that's the casting away of Israel. So if the casting away of Israel be the reconciling of the world, understand, the whole world got increased from the casting away of the children of Israel. As the children of Israel were cast away and spread out unto the nations, the whole world flourished. The earth grew in productivity. The earth grew in resources, in finance, in everything, because of the casting away of the children of Israel. Go ahead.
For if the first fruits be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches.
If the root is holy, so are the branches. Go ahead.
And if some of the branches be broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them partaketh of the root.
So this whole scenario is being explained in the essence of a tree. Soon as Yeshua healed the man said, I see men as trees. He is explaining the holy story of Israel rise and fall through a tree. Go ahead.
And fatness of the olive tree. Boast not against the branches, but if you boast, you beareth not the root, but the root you. You will say then, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in.
The branches are broken off, that I might be grafted in. So here it is. Yahweh says on Tabernacles, I want you to go break off the branches. You just don't know you the branches. And then build me a booth. Wait a minute. You are the house. I want you to break off the branches and build you a tent and gather under that tent. You don't understand what you're doing. Go ahead.
Well, because of unbelief they were broken off.
Because of unbelief they were broken off. Go ahead.
And you standeth by faith. Be not high-minded, but fair. For if Elohim spared not the natural branches, take heed, lest he also spare not you. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of Elohim, on them which fell severity, but toward you goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise you also shall be cut off. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in. For Elohim is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree again?
The natural branches will be able to be grafted in back into their tree. So even if the branches were broken off, they can be put back on the tree. Go ahead.
That was it, verse 24.
All right. Let's hear the conclusion of this matter. Let's go to Revelation chapter 22. Revelation 22. And we're going to read verses 1 through 5.
And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. And in the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations.
Wait a minute. So now we're getting right back to the beginning of things. See, a lot of times we think that Yahweh has to completely redo his whole setup. No, he's not going to redo his whole setup. What he's going to do is redo us. See, it says, for he finding fault with them. Something wrong with the covenant? No, something wrong with the people. Go ahead.
And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. And they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. And there shall be no night there, and they need no candle, neither light of the sun, for the Adonai Elohim gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever.
All right. So let us enjoy our last day of tabernacle, gathering together under our branches, and we will enjoy the light of the moon, but one day we will be able to do that and never need that light, for we will have his light. That is all that we're going to do for tonight. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.